Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Manovi Schoonover, Operations Specialist at Redmond Consulting, and I'll be hosting this event. Before we begin, for those who may not know, Redmond is a nonprofit organization that provides tribal technical assistance on a variety of programs, including, but not limited to, Tribal Grant Government's Comprehensive, Responding to Urban Natives, and Elder Abuse. This ranges from policy review via email to site visits. If you're interested, you can contact me at hanovi@red-wind.net. That's HONOVI at red-wind.net. You can also visit our website at red-wind.net for additional information on services we provide, as well as upcoming events and resources, such as handouts and guidebooks that you can download. As this states, this presentation was brought to you in partnership with Redmond Consulting, and this project is supported by grant number 15J OVW 21GK 02197 STOP, awarded by the Office of Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication, program, and exhibition are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice. This webinar is a part of our Tribal College Campus project, and it does have captioning, which you'll need to turn on manually from the menu. It should be a little thing that looks like CC. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them into the chat box or the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And from there, you can either use the chat to speak your questions openly or the Q&A in order to do it anonymously. Or if you prefer, you can click the hand icon. You'll all be muted, so if we see the hand, we can then unmute you so that you can ask your question verbally. If there are any tech issues, you can send a private message to me and we'll try to get it resolved. And I will now turn it over to Mylira.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to first say thank you to Red Wind Consulting for inviting me out to speak to you guys today about a topic that is really near and dear to my heart. When individuals experience certain forms of trauma, at times, being alive seems more like a nightmare than actually going to bed. So I want to begin to give you guys an understanding of what trauma is, give you guys an understanding of what suicidal ideations are, and ways that we can help individuals navigate those spaces and places. So you're going to get a little bit of education, you're going to get some tools and intervention, and then towards the end, I'm going to kind of bring you into the room and allow for you to just reflect on the importance of finding meaning in life. So we're going to get this thing started and go to the next slide. All right, so again, this information in this webinar covers a hard topic on suicidality and sexual assault. So please take care of your spirit while joining this webinar. If you need to take a moment to take a step out, please feel free to do so. If something's too hard, again, utilize the Q&A section or reach out to myself or Hanovi so that we can provide you with supports. We'll go to the next one. All right, so who am I? My name is Mylira Green, and I'm hailing all the way from Virginia. I'm a servant at heart, and I do that as a licensed clinical social worker, a master healer, a transformative speaker, and a coach. The reason why I do this and the reason why this topic is so important to me, you begin to kind of figure that out as I begin to share a little bit of my story. But is essentially to serve people where they are. Now, I am going to give a disclaimer. I am a very energetic person. I'm recovering from the flu. So if I say anything that you don't understand or if my voice sounds a little muffled, please bear with me today. But I am here and I'm ecstatic to be able to provide you with something practical to possibly save a life. I am a healer naturally. I believe that all people deserve to have a second chance of life. No matter what traumas you've experienced, no matter what your challenges are. And this is an open space and forum. So Please feel free at any time to ask questions in the middle of this presentation. I'm going to also ask you guys to engage with me with some of this, and if I ever need to pause the cough again, I totally apologize. As you see, I am a family woman as well. I have two beautiful living babies, 7 and 4, and then I have two angel babies. And I'm a liver of life. I am all things professional. I absolutely love being a social worker, but I also know how to have fun. And the only way that I can actually do that is because I've taken time to heal from my own things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well throughout this presentation. And we're going to go to the next slide. So, when it comes to sexual assault and suicide ideations, it is important for us to, number one, look at the statistics and stats. So, according to victimservicescenter.org, 1 in 3 of women who have experienced sexual trauma has thought about suicide. And when we're really looking at the suicide number as a whole, there are a significant amount of successful suicides every day in the United States alone. And the last time that I looked at the census, it was 139 successful suicides daily, because people just became very overwhelmed. And continuing to look at this here, those who have experienced some type of sexual trauma are more likely to be diagnosed with major depressive disorder and PTSD, which makes it easier to experience thoughts of suicide due to major stress and anxiety. As we go through this, I'm going to kind of share with you why is this such an important topic for us to even discuss. Because a lot of the times what I tell people is we think suicide has one look, but towards the end of this presentation, you'll see that that's not quite the case. And then here from National Sexual Violence Resource Center, they state that 13% of survivors have attempted suicide. And this for me is very imperative and important. So this conversation is very right on time. And I will say is that at any time, if anybody again feels, sensitive about this topic, please reach out. And I hope that I can create an atmosphere where you feel like this is a safe place just for you to be able to learn and grow. We can go to the next. All right, so I want you to read this to yourself silently. I'm also going to read it out loud. And I would love for you to share with me in the chat, just as a way of participation of what does this say to you. There was a gentleman, Ned Vazzini, who wrote, "It's kind of a funny story." And this quote stands out for me so much. And it says, "I didn't want to wake up. I was having a much better time asleep." And that's really sad. It was almost like a reverse nightmare. Like when you wake up from a nightmare, you're so relieved. I woke up into a nightmare. I really want to hear what comes to mind when you think of this. If this was your thought waking up every day, what do you think would come to mind for you? And I'll give you guys a moment to kind of share your thoughts, if any. And again, please raise your hand if you want to share it out loud. I want to give you guys an opportunity to participate today. Well, as I wait for you guys to engage, the thing for me that I tell people is when individuals have experienced some form of trauma, and we'll talk a little bit about what that actually looks like, what that is. At times, their reality seems so suffocating that living doesn't seem like the best option, but death does. And I picked this gentleman here in the military because I do work with military personnel. And I had one gentleman who literally went days without sleeping at times because of his fear of what he was going to see when he went to sleep. So to read this quote here and to think that somebody's life is worse than the nightmare that they find themselves having every day, no wonder why some people choose death instead of life. Someone here says, and sorry, my dog. Someone here says they don't. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm so sorry. All right, that's why I gave the disclaimer. I have 2 little ones. So it says they don't want to face any of the issues they've been through. Absolutely. And at times, a lot of it is we don't live in a world where people are easily encouraged to embrace their story, easily encouraged to embrace the things that has happened to them. So a lot of people suffer in silence, and the more we suffer in silence, the more that person carries that nightmare with them, the more that person carries the impact of what happened with them. So at times it's a lot easier just to sleep the day away than to be awake and face my issues and my problems. So thank you so much for sharing. We can go to the next one. This one here also spoke to me, and this was by Tiffany DeBartolo. And it said, "Did you really want to die?" was the question that somebody asked her. And her response was, "No one commits suicide because they want to die." And then it says, "Then why do they do it?" And simply put, because they want to stop the pain. There are some people who life has been so painful for them, especially if you are a survivor of sexual assault, that they don't know how to move forward from that. I tell people when individuals experience trauma, and most of people, at least 90% of people, have experienced some form of trauma in their life. And it may not be the big T's like sexual abuse and assault or an accident or things like that. It could be something small where I may have not had anything to eat. So when I got home from school, I didn't eat at school. I didn't eat at home either. It could be something as simple and as small as that. But they carry the pain of that moment with them for the rest of their lives. And then when we pile on what we just talked about on the last slide, if that person never got an opportunity to actually process what they experienced, imagine the pain that they continue to carry with them. It's kind of like having a broken bone and you never do anything about it. It may eventually heal, but it's not going to heal right. So if I move it the wrong way, if I get triggered by a conversation that I have, or there's a reminder there's some pain that comes with that. And for some people, the pain becomes so intense that life doesn't seem better than death. We can go to the next slide here. Now, this one here, this is the last quote that I have to kind of just start us to really think about some of the thoughts that some individuals may have. And that is, "But in the end, one needs more courage to live than to kill himself." There's a reason why, for those of you who are actually direct providers and those of you who actually might have experienced this in the past or struggle in some way, this is why we ask at the end, like, what keeps you alive? Because for most people, it's never really about what they do have. It's about the one thing they feel like they don't have. And sometimes that can be peace, that can be happiness. For others, it could be financial means to take care of their basic needs. For some people, it could be the feeling of belonging or lack thereof. But I have to find that one thing that's going to keep me living. And that's why we ask, what is the one thing that keeps you going? What's the one thing that brings you meaning in life? What's the one thing that's going to keep you from taking your life? So just momentarily, I see that we have about 9 participants here. I just want you to simply, inside of the chat function, just write down, and if you want to do it anonymous, again, the question and answer section, what is the one thing that keeps you going every day? What is that one thing? I know for me, it is my purpose. I see my family here. Thank you for sharing. Mine is my purpose. I know that there is a lot of people that is attached to me. And if I gave up, those people won't have a chance to fully fulfill their life. I see my kids. I absolutely love that. I see my family. For many people, it is their loved ones that keep them going, my children and my siblings. Again, it's finding that one thing to keep a person going forward. So as we're talking about this, I'm going to give you again in the beginning some information, but I'm also going to give you some practical things that you can utilize to help with assessing and even thinking about just, your own situation, your own self. And then from there, being able to give you an activity to kind of sit down. My loved ones and I love myself too much. Absolutely. That self-love is so important. And we're actually going to be talking about that next week. I see my children as well. Thank you so much for sharing. We're going to go to the next piece here. And as we go through this is where we're going to actually get into a space where we're going to really talk about like what exactly is suicidal ideations. And we're going to go ahead to the next slide here. And I appreciate you guys bearing with me. So according to Hamer in 2023, their definition is suicidal ideations, often called suicidal thoughts or ideas, is a broad term used to describe a range of contemplations, wishes, and preoccupations with death and suicide. There is no universally accepted consistent definition of suicidal ideations, which lead to ongoing challenges for clinicians, researchers, and educators. If you are here, excuse me, as someone that provide direct service, you know the feeling that you get when a client begins to tell you that this is what they feel. And if you are on the other side of this and you've actually had these thoughts and feelings, you know what it feels like when you get so overwhelmed and you don't know what to share and what to do. This definition allows for us to really understand that there is no concrete definition of what is a suicidal ideation. For some people, they're very specific. For others, they're fleeting. And we want to make sure that whatever the suicidal ideation is, we want to take it serious. There is some schools of thought that do believe that individuals that report any like self-harm thoughts or things like that is that they're attention seeking. Today, I want to tell you, no, there are people who genuinely is so much in pain, they don't want to do life anymore. And we want to be very mindful of how we deal with these individuals, especially those who just have experienced some form of victimization, some form of trauma, some form of a challenge. We want to be very, very mindful of how we respond to those individuals. So I want you to begin to start thinking, like, how do you define suicidal ideations? And the reason why I want you to do this, because especially if you're someone who's working with an individual that is reporting this, your definition is going to determine how serious you take that person or not. That's going to be the foundation across the board of how you move and how you navigate and how to utilize all this information I'm about to give you now in this space of time. So I really want you to begin to think about what is your personal definition, because once you can answer your personal definition, it's going to help you know with everything that we're going to discuss from this moment forward how we're going to incorporate this into your day to day. We can go to the next slide. All right, now the American Psychological Association has a different definition. Theirs is a little bit more concise, and it says suicidal ideations are thoughts about or a preoccupation with killing oneself, often as a symptom of a major depressive episode. Most instances of suicidal ideations do not progress to attempted suicide. I will tell you, as much as I love the mental health field, we are so matter of fact at times that we count people out. Not everybody that is suicidal have major depression. I know some very optimistic people that live with suicidal ideations. And this is why it is so imperative for us to know what our own personal definition is. Now, if someone has major depression, do it put them at a bigger risk of suicidal ideations? Yes, it does. But that person, not everybody who is suicidal looks like this young lady on the screen. There may be somebody that you know every day that comes to the office and smiles in your face, but yet they go home and they have the hardest time. So we want to be very, very mindful of our definitions. Someone says some do a lot of laughter to distract people. Absolutely. For others, they hide behind smiles. They hide behind showing up and serving. There are a lot of people that are in pain, but we never know because we don't live in a society that really care when we ask a person, how are you doing today? Or if we do care, the other person don't know how to answer it because they just say, hey, I'm fine. I'm well. Today I'm good. We got to do a lot better with how we define this thing. We can go to the next one. So here's some important things to consider. So we've talked about the definition of suicidal ideations. And give me 1 second. Again, I apologize for what's happening with me, but we've talked about the definition of suicidal ideation, and that's just really important because based off of your definition will determine how you show up in other people's lives. Even if you're not a worker, it could be for a family member, it can be for a friend, it can be for a stranger on the street. Based off of my definition of what I think it is how I'm going to move forward. But there are some things that we must consider for any individual. And if you do fall into any of this stuff, I encourage you. It is okay to get help. It is okay to be a therapist with a therapist, a coach with a coach, an advocate with an advocate. It is totally okay. So as we're going through this, I just encourage you, don't look at this as judgment, but look at this as a space where you can start asking yourself, how do I feel when when I'm listing these things out? Because depending on how you feel, that allows you to have more empathy when you're working with victims as well. And those of you who have experienced this, as you're answering these questions, now you know kind of the space and the places you can start it. So this is for everyone. So no matter what you are watching this as, and you can even tell me, are you watching this as a clinician? Are you watching this as someone who's a survivor? And you can do it in a Q&A, so it's all anonymous. But I just want to make sure that as I'm giving you this information, you can utilize it the best way that you can. We're going to go to the next slide here. So a risk assessment serves as CPR. We cannot be afraid to assess for suicide risk. We cannot be afraid. We cannot, and I'm going to tell you guys kind of like the importance of having these kinds of discussions. But a lot of this information I'm going to present came from the Minnesota Department of Health. They did a study in 2019, and they had 5 steps of how one should assess for suicide risk. And the reason why this is so important is because assessing for suicide is bigger than asking somebody, are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you have suicidal ideations? We need to look at that person, their entire environment, and everything that's going on, because this is going to answer at times, why is that person even at that space? There is always a why someone is considering taking their life. Always, no matter how big or small that is. There's always a why. So we want to identify their risk factors. We want to identify their protective factors, because that is typically what has kept them alive this long. We want to conduct a suicide inquiry, and I'm going to share with you the importance of asking certain questions in such a matter-of-fact way to really save someone's life. We want to determine their risk level and determine their interventions. And I'm going to give you as much as I can in this brief period of time. I am going to be mindful of time here. At any time, if I'm speaking too fast, please let me know. But I want to give you guys as much as I can so that we can really start saving lives together. We're going to go to the next slide here. So, risk factors that you may have. The first biggest one is history of trauma. As I shared, there is 90% of most people who have had some form of trauma in their life. And a lot of the times you'll hear people talk about the big T's. So like the sexual abuse and assault, child abuse and neglect. You'll have like any types of crime that's getting against you. You'll talk about accidents, wars. People think about that, but traumas can be something as small as, I went to the store and I saw somebody who was really, really strange, and they followed me in the store. Now, every time I go into the store, I got to watch over my shoulder. It can also look like that little kid that they don't have food in the house. So they go to school, and then today was the one meal they don't like, and they got home and they went 24 hours without eating. That can be a trauma for them. So we want to know, what is the history of that person's trauma? And then also being well informed of what trauma is and what is not. Trauma is not this big elaborate thing that, people are just falling over. Sometimes our trauma is bleed out in our character. It's bleed out in how we perceive life. It's bleeding out in our core beliefs and our values and the things that we have. So it's still important to assess people's history of trauma and what they define as it. And sometimes if you are in a space of being a clinician, it's asking those motivational interviewing questions to see, and always further assessing. You don't just stop at that first assessment. The second piece is triggering events. What typically triggers that person having that thought? Is it a trauma reminder, or is it simply they had a loss that they was not expecting? For some people, grief triggers having suicidal ideations. They may have lost a family member. They may have lost a job. They may have lost their health status. But so we need to know what has triggered this level of thought. Their history of ideation. When was the first time they had this thought? How frequent is it? How intense is it? Do they have a plans, a means, or intent, or is it just fleeting ideations? How often do they think about it? Really being able to know that. Their medical history and their medical health. There are some medical diagnoses that trigger mental health issues. And one big example of that is your thyroids. A lot of the times when people have thyroid issues, they'll find themselves in their mental health either going up or down, where there's an increase in anxiety or increase in depression. So we want to make sure that our clients, or those of us who are experiencing this, making sure that we do bigger than just what their trauma is or their history, but make sure that they had a recent medical exam, because sometimes there are certain medications, there are certain physical health ailments that can impact that person, especially if they have a terminal illness that cannot go away. When individuals have suicidal ideations, and we talked a little bit about this in one of the quotes, it's this feeling of being stuck. So if I have a medical condition that I cannot change and know I'm stuck, life doesn't seem as appealing as it did when I could get up and go the way that I wanted to. We want to talk about mental health. Again, those individuals who have major depressive disorder, PTSD, borderline personality disorder, any type of severe mental illness, they're at higher risk of suicidal ideations. So we want to know mentally, where is this person at as well? Do they have diagnoses? Are they on any medications for stability? Their substance use history. Nobody just wakes up and say, I want to use substances, okay? A lot of times it's their way of coping. It's a coping strategy, it's a coping mechanism. So we want to see, again, it goes back to their why. Why did we end up here? Their why they use is going to answer the why they're suicidal. Because the why they use, if they're using it and now they're suicidal, it means the why they use isn't taking care of the why they were using it in the first place. So we want to really kind of create this bridge and allow for people to understand that all of this is linked. Self-injurious behaviors, so that would be like cutting or doing anything that to harm yourself. And we want to be very intentional about not necessarily listing ways that people harm themselves or things like that, because we don't want to give anybody with those ideas any other ideas, right? So when you are assessing this, you just want to simply ask, hey, have you ever done anything to really kind of harm yourself, hurt yourself, leave you with any marks, any bruises, and allow for them to share that. For some people, it may not look like that. For some people, if they are having self-injurious behaviors, especially when anxiety is attached, and is when it comes to little kids, you'll see little kids mess with their face or claw at their face. Like that is also a sign of that as well. Or biting fingernails really, really low, or pulling out hair is way more than just the cutting. I've already talked about feeling trapped. The feeling trapped, no sense of purpose, feeling of hopelessness. Those three combined together will make anyone say life is not worth living. When I feel like I have no out, when I literally feel like I can't go nowhere from here, where else do I go? And if I can't take away that pain, what do I do with it? Other risk factors is withdrawals from others. It doesn't mean that that person is an introvert or extrovert, but because life is so painful, I don't want to be around people. I'm going to start to isolate myself. If that is a person coping strategy, at times we want to just make sure and just ask them, hey, when you are by yourself, what are the thoughts that you're having? That person may present with uncontrolled anger. They may have some reckless and risky behavior. Those individuals that may just act like they don't care what happens with their life, or a change in emotional baseline. This one here is super duper imperative. If a person no longer is acting the way that you know that they normally act, it's as easy as asking them, like, hey, what is going on and what's happening? All of these are risk factors when it comes to individuals who have suicidal ideations. We're going to go to the next slide. Again, at any time, if you guys have any questions, I know that this can be a lot of information, but I'm just trying to provide you with what I can. So when we do get into kind of the intervention space, you know what you can utilize. Now, this one is my favorite. This slide actually came from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They released this information in 2022, and they talked about protective factors. If you are working with any individual that is suicidal, this is what's going to help you create a treatment plan to help them find a meaning in life so that they don't reside anymore in that suicidal thought. So what does that look like? We want to look at what are their individual protective factors. How well do they cope and solve problems? A lot of those things that was listed on the risk piece, some of those are coping mechanisms, isolating, substance abuse, being able to withdraw from others, like all of those things. Is that really a healthy coping strategy? We want to know, how well does this person cope when they're under stress? And then we talked about the meaning of life. Do they have a reason to live? Relationships are super imperative and important. For some people, their basic needs can be met, but if they don't feel like that they belong and they are safe, it doesn't matter how much money they have. It does not matter what their status is. It does not matter their influence. If they do not feel like they have a place to belong, suicidal ideation sometimes is where they reside. So we want to ask people, like, what is your support system? Who is your support system? And then asking them, who do you have charging you up? Especially those individuals that kind of have it where those thoughts come consistently. We want to ask them, who do you have in your space, in your circle, that can serve as a reminder of why you are doing what you're doing? We want to look at their community. It goes back to their support system as well, the level of their connectivity. Who are they connected with? Red Wing Consulting is a collaborative effort that will be a part of connectivity. They now have a place where they can get this type of education, learn what to utilize it with, want to see what access they have to resources. And then societal, we must understand that there are certain groups that are at a higher risk of committing suicide, especially depending on the means that they have it. Recently, there's been a study and they were talking about law enforcement officers. And this year, thus far, has been 19 successful suicides when it comes to officers. And all of them was done by their firearm. So then the question of the matter is, like, what is the access that they have to the means of that? The cultural implication of suicide. Suicide is still a no-no to talk about. In some religious cultures, that's not a conversation that people want to have. So it's one of those things that people kind of suffer in silence. So I'm grateful that we're able to have this conversation so then people don't have to suffer in silence. We can go to the next slide here. So we do want to inquire about the suicide risk. Listen, most emergency rooms or any type of behavioral health support typically do not provide support at all in the moment if there's no plan, behavior, intent, or means. You can have an ideation all day, but if there's no plan to do it, intent, and a means, then a lot of the times this is one of the biggest barriers when it comes to our society. So there are some people that reside in ideation, and by the time they get to plan, intent, and means, they don't share, because when they had the ideations, they didn't have anywhere to go for help. And this is why this is so important to have this conversation, because if you reside in this ideation space, we want to make sure that you get the help that you need. Okay. And we want to ask a person, are you thinking about killing yourself? Don't just say, hey, are you thinking about harming yourself? Harm can be anything. That can be cutting, that can be banging my head, that can be, doing risky behavior. But I need to walk away knowing, are you thinking about killing yourself? If you tell me yes, I need to know, do you have a plan? Do you have a means? Do you have an intent? If you have those, get the help that you need. Get the support that you need. You want to go to the next slide here. Okay, so determine the risk level to properly intervene. Again, I'm going to make sure that you guys get access to these slides. Hopefully they can email it out to you because I do want to get to the next piece of this. But we want to know, again, once we ask these questions, if it's just an intent, then you won't get a hospital admissions. But they may say, hey, let's do outpatient. You don't have a lot of risk factors. It may just be something temporary that's going on. But then when we get to there's an intent, there's a plan, there's a means, then we need to give that person more rigorous interventions. And we need to also know that it is okay to call and help somebody go through this process. There's a national number 988 now that's 24/7 that you can call and text if someone is really having a hard time, and they will send a person out to their home to make sure that they are okay and connect them with their local emergency room and emergency services. Go to the next slide here. All right, so I'm going to give you this quick case vignette here. I'm going to read this to you guys, and I just want to see, what would you do if you were to intervene? We can go to the next piece. All right, so very briefly, Luna is a 17-year-old freshman in college and is starting to feel overwhelmed with the demands of school and the memories of her childhood. She is a very smart girl, expressing that she skipped the 4th grade and have a supportive family. However, Luna was exposed to sexual experiences at 3 years old. This led to her engaging in risky sexual behaviors, and so she was sexually assaulted at the beginning of her senior year in high school. Luna has struggled with suicidal ideation since she was 13 years old. She denies a history of self-injurious behaviors, but reports she does not feel like she has a reason for living. She expressed she wants to give up and die because she does not see a way out. Luna reported that at times her ideations make her think about taking cleaning solution under her bathroom sink, but is too scared to take that step, even though she really wants to. She expressed she has never received help in the past, but feels very overwhelmed with the thoughts of death that she desires to receive help. How would you intervene with Luna? And again, you can put it in the chat if you have any further questions. But typically this is where we do kind of an interaction here. I just want to know, from what you just heard, what would be something that you would do to help this young lady here? All right. As you guys are thinking here, let's see. Try to find out, has she ever seek counseling? So this would be her first time seeking counseling. That's an amazing question to start at. And also it makes me see that you looked at the risk factors as well and what she's thinking, because she's not saying that she has a plan, a means, or intent. She just having these thoughts. So definitely finding out, has she ever sought counseling before? So I share this case vignette because, believe it or not, Luna is me. Exchange Luna from Mylira. This is my story. This is why I do what I do. This is why I am super duper big on talking about suicidal ideations. Ask what is important to her. Absolutely. Growing up, I was the person that came from a 2-parent household. So I struggled significantly with my mental health. I struggled significantly with my my self-worth. And nobody ever asks, like, are you okay? But I hid behind a smile. I was the most popular, unpopular person ever. I was in marching band. I was in every church function. I was smiling, but behind that smile, I literally just wanted to die. So this for me is so important because I wanted to try to understand, what did people miss when it came to me? Because I am a survivor of a suicide attempt, so I know what it feels like to not want to live anymore. And I see there's more things coming in, so I want to say thank you guys. I will sit and talk with her and let her know she is only and ask if she would like to see a behavioral health provider. Also, whom is the family? Is she close to? What does she want to do when she grow up? All of those things was questions that I wanted somebody to ask me. So when you are sitting here and you're dealing with other victims of sexual abuse and assault, or people that come to you that have suicidal ideations, remember that they're trying to find their reason to live, their reason to come, to keep going. And all the questions that you guys ask are super duper important. I want to go to the next slide because I want to make sure I have enough time towards the end for you guys. So here's the biggest answer to this, right? How do we decrease suicidal ideations? And I'm going to give that to you. But I will say, if there's somebody on this right now that's kind of like, Mylira, I hear everything that you're saying and I'm Luna, or I know how Luna felt. I want to give you this apology letter very briefly before we get into this next piece that I wrote for survivors. So I just welcome you to kind of close your eyes, and I just want you to hear my words. Dear survivor, you are more than enough. Your life experiences do not define who you are, but cultivate your very essence. Support you have never received a apology from the person who victimized you or hurt you. In that case, I take the time to send a heartfelt apology on their behalf, because you deserve to be free from the entrapments of their egregious actions. I apologize for the years of pain you have endured due to that moment that you will never get back. I apologize for all the decisions and actions you made that were more detrimental to your well-being or that of others due to trying to find normalcy again. I apologize for the years you spent in bondage trying to figure out what you did to attract such experiences. I apologize for the years of self-love you missed out on because the message you kept hearing was that you did not deserve love. Please know you were only a victim in that moment. But as I read this to you, You are a survivor. And just like survivors of major illnesses get celebrated when they go into remission, I celebrate you today because you are no longer a victim. You are the best you there is, and you are free. Walk in your freedom. You may come back into the space. Again, I just wanted to give that to somebody in the event that the vignette was triggering or what we're talking about. It sounds like it's simple and rocket science when I know that suicidal ideations aren't simple. They come from a very complex place. They come from a place of pain. They come from a place of hurt. But let's figure out how can we get to the next step from here. We may go to the next slide. And the answer to that is finding meaning. Finding meaning. There are a lot of people who are still here on this side of earth because they found a reason to keep living. It is the moment where the one thing I don't have becomes so debilitating that I don't think that I can keep going. So we want to help people find meaning. And my hope is that at this point of the presentation, if you have been struggling in any way, even minimally, where you don't want to get up in the morning, I hope that this helps you find meaning in life. So this next slide, I just welcome you to watch this video. We're almost at the end of the presentation and we will go from there. Playing that video while we go to the next slide, but I love to show that video because that is the role that we play in our client's life. Literally, that is the role. Like, we want to make sure that no matter what trauma reminders are still in their space, no matter how much healing they still have to do, just like this little boy with this dog, the dog was a reminder of the one thing he did not have. But because the dog was persistent and kept showing him that there was still another side, he was able to smile and go out and play. Be the dog for somebody. Be that person that even if that individual just does not see the light at the end of the tunnel, you keep showing up and you keep telling them and you keep reminding them until they see that there is a life worth living, that you provide them with the resources that they need, that you be a safe place. Because outside of your position, you need to know what makes your life meaningful. So then when you have different trauma reminders, when there's things that happen in your life, you know that you are still worth having breath in your body. We can go to the next slide here. Again, if you or anyone you know is struggling with suicidal ideations, please have them call 988, or they can simply just text TALK to 741-741. This is a 24/7 service. If you have anybody who is a part of military personnel, you can also have them call this number, and they have a actual hotline attached to this that is specifically for those who have served in the military. I really do hope if there was someone on this call or on this webinar today that really was struggling, that this inspired some form of hope, that you know that you're not by yourself, that you know that this moment does not define who you are. Yes, I am this elaborate social worker, life coach, speaker extraordinaire. However, I also am a suicide attempt survivor. I am a sexual abuse assault survivor. I am someone who's diagnosed with PTSD and have my own therapist, even as a therapist. So I want to be an example to show you that you do not and you will not be a part of that 139 successful suicides, because now you know what it is and go out there and ask for help. We can go to the next slide, and I believe that's just opening up the floor for any questions that you guys have, any comments, anything you need clarity on. Please feel free to put it in the Q&A box or in the chat function for the next few minutes. As we go through that, we can go through the remainder of the slides. I'm just going to give you guys a few resources. Here's a free gift. It's a personal development plan. If you are trying to find what that meaning of life is for you and you want to be intentional about starting today, this plan is going to allow for you to go through the 6 dimensions of life and really plan out what you want your life to look like in your spiritual dimension, mental, emotional, physical, social, and cash flow. It is free. All you have to do is scan this thing that you see on the screen. And once you scan it, you put in your email information. It's going to send you over a PDF that you can work through at your own time. So please feel free to get that free gift from today just to say thank you for your time. And if you go to the next slide here as well, feedback is welcome. I want to be someone who really save lives. And I can't do that if I don't hear the feedback from those that actually participate in the sessions that I do. So feel free if there's something that you like, you didn't like, please let me know so that I can continue to do a better job. And I think the next slide is just my references, but I want to give you guys an opportunity. This is where you can contact me and find me. But please feel free to ask any questions or anything that you might have. And if not, I'm going to turn it back over to you, Hanovi, sorry. Mhm.
Thank you. We're just gonna go through these final references. And I'll give everyone just a couple seconds to send in any remaining comments or questions before we wrap.
Well, if not, I definitely want to say thank you guys for trusting me today. I know that this was not an easy topic to discuss, but it is an important topic to discuss. I think there's a question about the certificate, so I'm going to let you answer that. But I just want to definitely say thank you guys, and I really genuinely hope that this was helpful for you. So peace and blessings, and thank you guys again for your time.
Thank you. On the question of the certificate, if you do email me, I can get you a certificate sent over for this webinar. And we will just start wrapping up. So before we end the session, I want to let you all know that there will be an eval popping up once Zoom closes. We'd love to hear what you thought, so if you're able to fill that out, we'd very much appreciate it. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be uploaded onto Redwind's YouTube channel within the next few days, and you can also find our previous recordings there. In closing, I'd like to thank our presenter, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you all stay safe, and I hope to see you all at the next webinar.